Yes, then the next characteristics of direct rule in Zimbabwe is that the system was characterized by the massive alienation of land. Basically, in most of the African countries that were being mistreated by the British or mistreated by the European, most of them had these common challenges. They had these common grievances towards land alienation. Some of them were being forced to provide what? Labor. And some of them were being forced even to pay tax. So the system was characterized by massive alienation of African land, compelling Africans to provide labor to the new European settlers. European settlers, these were the white population that were already encouraged by the colonialists to come into African countries that were colonized by those European. And when we talk about the white settlers, we are even having those that were having experience in terms of maybe trade, those who are having experience in terms of agriculture. They were welcome to come and exploit the African natural resources such as fertile land so that they can accomplish and provide what is needed to the administration of the colonialists. So that is it. Then the next characteristic, which is the last characteristics of the African or of the direct rule in Zimbabwe is that there was a racial segregation. There was a racial segregation which was effected through the the legislative council. A racial segregation means a discrimination based on the race. Whites were discriminating African based on their skin color. So when we talk about this regime, Africans were not being considered. They were being discriminated because of their color. They were not being considered important in terms of the system of government or in terms of ruling. Why? Because the Legislative Council itself overruled them based on their color. That was the discrimination based on what? Race. African communities suffered greatly in the land of the settler regime. So after being discriminated towards or discriminated against them by the whites, they really suffered a lot in the white man country, or in the white man in the hands of the white settlers in their own country. So that's all about the characteristics of the direct rule in Zimbabwe. If you are asked at least to give some of the characteristics of a direct rule in Zimbabwe, these are what you're supposed to talk about. Sometimes the question can ask you to differentiate or the characteristics, or differentiate or give the differences between direct rule and indirect rule. When we talk about direct rule in Zimbabwe or in African countries, and also indirect rule in. So if they ask you to give the differences, please try to look at them in this particular system. What we have talked about here, just check in the indirect rule. What were they having in common, and how are they differentiating themselves, or how are they different with another one? So when you talk about the differences, please check onto them, and sometimes they can ask you also to give the similarities of direct and indirect rule. So those are the questions that at least you're supposed to familiarize yourself with. Then after that, let's look at the reasons for the use of direct rule by the British in Zimbabwe. Let's look at the reason. Why did British just use, or why did they choose direct rule as a good system to be used in Zimbabwe? One, the British had a desire of fully controlling the economy of the Zimbabwe and maximizing the profit generated through the direct involvement in the administration. They had got that desire of fully controlling the economy of Zimbabwe. Remember, in direct rule, they were giving other chance to the African leaders. But now in direct rule that was used in Zimbabwe, it was basically meaning that the British were the people who were going to fully control that land in terms of colony and etc. And as far as concerned, the Bisako, which is the British company, was already there. So they were very much interested in the economy of the Zimbabwe, and that's why they use the direct rule. Then the next, the Shona and Ndebele resistance against the British intrusion made them not to trust the Ndebele chief and nor use them as British agents. Remember the Shona and the Ndebele, these are the community that had already resisted. And the resistance against the British intrusion made them not to trust the Ndebele, who are the chiefs in that community, who are the chief in that land. So they had not to trust Ndebele as white, because they knew that these people had already resisted the British at first. You see? So British do not have any trust of also involving other Africans, leaders in their own system. They wanted to do with them totally, and that is direct rule. So being that these people resisted first, made the British to use direct by overthrowing them. So that's the next reason why they use. Then the next, which is the third reason why the British used direct rule in Zimbabwe, is that there was lack of reliable political system to be used in the direct administration of the region. The local political institution based on the what? The Induna system had been what? Destroyed when the British conquered, and we talk about the lack of reliable political, and that political system has been destroyed. Basically, it was destroyed when the British conquered the Zimbabwe at first. And therefore, they could not use indirect rule whereby they wanted to involve the local leaders who are in the land. They could not do that. Why? Because they had already destroyed that system of government in the fight. When Shona and Ndebele resisted against them, they had retaliated by defeating them, all of them. And therefore, they had destroyed even the African local system of government. And therefore, they had no what? They lacked reliable political system, at least to use. And therefore, they just use their own political system and to mark what a direct rule is. Then the next reason why the British use direct rule in Zimbabwe is that the existence of enough Bisako personnel on the spot who are familiar with the area well as the British system of the government. When you talk about the Bisako, we are talking about the government, we are talking about the British company here. The personnel, we are talking about those people or the industrialists, those that were in charge of the industry. They were already familiar with the area. They knew each and every places in the Zimbabwe. And therefore, they had no problem to be made aware of the region. They had got all of the information needed towards towards the Zimbabwe. And knowing that, make even the British system of government to be very effective in that land, which is Zimbabwe. And therefore, that marked the next reason why the British use direct rule. Then the next reason is that the favorable climatic condition and the expected rich mineral. We have just mentioned that, especially when we are talking about characteristics. Zimbabwe was having rich minerals. The climatic condition was favorable in terms of agriculture, and therefore they wanted to fully control. They wanted to fully control the what? They wanted to fully control the Zimbabwe, simply based on the what? The minerals, based on the good condition for Africa, for the agriculture. This will provide them with the necessary what? Funds or finance that was required in the administration of the what? The British, or in the administration of the colonialists. So this is the next reason why they use that. Then the next, let's look at the Bisako a little bit. Bisako was just a company that was used by the British, and the head of the company that was used in the southern part of Africa was known as the Cecil Rhodes. I think you are familiar with the name. Cecil Rhodes was the personnel in charge of this company. So the British administrative structure, the Bisako administrative structure in the southern Rhodesia, which is Zimbabwe, in 1905 up to 1923, the government was headed by the residence of commissioner, who was appointed by the company station at the Salisbury So when you talk about the company, first it was having a structure, and the structure, the head was, the head of that, the head of the colony was a residence commissioner who was appointed by the what? The company. And after that we had, below him we were having the various commissioners in charge of the, the districts. When we talk about the districts, we are talking about the all, what? We are talking about all Europeans. Then after that, below them, there were African chiefs whose duty was what? Included collecting tax. The duties of African in this was to collect tax, maintaining law and order, and also recruiting labor. Then in 1898, the Legico was established. And Legico, we are talking about Legislative Council, heavily dominated by the British. So the Europeans were very many in that meeting than the African. And an executive council, and consisting of the residence commissioners and 4 nominees or Bisako was what? Also established. So there were additional of other whites in that kind of land. So this is all about understanding a bit of the structure of the Bisako, that company that was used in Zimbabwe. Then in 1902, the Native Affairs Department, headed by the what? The European Native Council Commissioner, was created, thus enriching the dominance of the. There was another creation of the Native Commissioner, which was a white or the British, making the white dominate the British very much. So this is all about the Bisako, and the next thing we'll be talking about the other method of administration by the colonies, by the European in Africa. Otherwise, have a great time and be blessed.